Welcome to the Heal Podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Gores, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. On today's episode of the Heal Podcast, I am joined by my very dear friend, Mary Firestone. She's a personal friend of mine because she is in the world of healing and health and wellness. And I forgot, was it Rita who introduced us?
I think it was Rita.
Shout out to Rita, we love you. But she's endured multiple traumas like many of us over our lifetime, which probably set her on the healing path and everything she's learned. But she really went through a trauma in 2018 when she was trapped in the Montecito mudslide, carrying a child in her belly and also ripped away from her husband and 4-year-old son at the time. So after that experience, she embarked on this journey to find out what could help her heal because it was just so emotionally traumatizing. Mm-hmm. And she has now put it all in a book. It's very similar to like all the things that I've tried. So it's just a wonderful resource that she was able to, turn around and share her healing journey and her experience and all the things she's tried, because as we know, there's so many modalities out there and it's all very overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And so it's such a gift. She's here with us today to talk a little bit about some of the modalities that worked for her and kind of sift through, all that's out there and share what has worked and been really effective for her. So Mary, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Kelly. It's great to be here.
Yay, reunited. Mm-hmm. So your book, Trusting the Dawn, How to Choose Freedom and Joy After Trauma. I think it is an amazing resource because you really break down the things that you tried and why they were beneficial, why they work. And it's just a great resource for anybody who's kind of lost or stuck on their journey of healing trauma. So why don't you start by kind of just telling us about the experience in Montecito, that story.
Sure.
So we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'd had some sexual assault trauma in childhood, which did start me on this journey of getting my master's degree in clinical psych and leading these retreats for women. It was always a passion of mine to heal and to share that with other people. And then in January 2018, we had just moved into this new 1890s farmhouse. So it was new to me, 1890s farmhouse in Montecito. It was in the best public school district up there. Oprah was our neighbor. It was very bucolic and perfect seeming. And the Thomas Fire had been raging that 2017. So we'd been evacuated multiple times. We still hadn't moved into this house. We'd been doing all this work on it. And we moved back in January, and they had called for a potential debris flow. But I think being from the East Coast, I really did not understand what that means. And we were not in the evacuation zone. So it was our 4th night ever sleeping in this house. And I had my then husband put I'm like, well, maybe there might be some leaking under the doors. So put up some boxes or something. Cut to 4 a.m. for no reason that I'm aware of. I woke up and we hadn't put curtains into the bedroom yet. So I could see the bedroom face the mountain. And it was literally like a tsunami of mud, 30 feet high, just coming at us. Fast. So I screamed, go get Ever, our son. His bedroom was upstairs. And by the time Napper, my then husband, had run to go get him, I couldn't even follow him because the whole wall had crushed in and there was mud and glass and debris up to my waist. So I ran the other direction to my bathroom and literally watched, I don't know if you saw that Naomi Watts Tsunami movie, but that's what it felt like. I saw, a house on my left just get sailing down the hill. On my right, there was my 2-story house the living room, and then the bedroom, my child's bedroom, ripped off, spun around backwards, going down the hill, and I thought that he was in it. So I wound up being trapped on my bathroom counter for 5 hours. The mud miraculously stopped like an inch below the counter, and I couldn't hear anything because a mudslide is very loud. Boulders, cars, houses, tumbling. And finally, about like an hour and a half later, I could hear them and I knew they were alive. So that was incredible. But that night, like sitting there in the dark, there was another presence with me. I know you've talked about like near-death experiences, and there was something else. I don't know how to describe it. I always believed in God and angels, but I really felt a presence with me that night. And just when I look back, like all of the things that lined up and how they lined up, like if seconds had been off.
If you hadn't woken up.
If I hadn't have woken up, if I hadn't have screamed, if he hadn't have gotten there, if there hadn't have been a huge gas explosion that had lit up the sky so I could see the mud, there was just so many things that I am just forever grateful for. And then I was rescued the next morning actually by a civilian named Orion.
Which I just think is like out of a fairy tale. I love the way you describe it in the book.
Yeah, he just came like charging in his waders, and I'd seen like the fire department had been rescuing other people off of their roofs, and I didn't think they didn't see me. So he came through, figured out how to get me out of there, and put me on the back of a firefighter. But now my daughter, who I was pregnant with at the time, her middle name is Orion.
Oh.
And he just checked in with me yesterday. Like we still stay in touch, and
Wow.
Yeah.
True hero.
True hero. Orion Womack, or a true hero.
Another shout out. But yeah, and you can speak about it now without, as many triggers. But afterwards, I mean, the nightmares and the sleep, kind of describe what you were dealing with that you've had to overcome and how long it took you, to really come back down to earth and feel like you were able to have a normal night and not fear, any sort of weather pattern coming your way.
Yeah. I think it's something that I've been talking more about now, several years later, and just kind of realizing, like, I don't know, for you, I feel like for a lot of people, it's like healing. It's not like heal, check, done. I feel like it's just this like layered experience. But right after the mudslide, I also was coated in poison oak because there was poison oak in the mud. So if the nightmares didn't wake me up, then I had this like all over my body.
Oh my God.
Would wake me up. So what did I do first? I did cranial sacral. I think for a lot of people that have experienced, especially like a really physical trauma, being able to just lie there and not talk for me was really a gift. So that was my first step. And then EMDR, actually, that stopped my nightmares.
And that's eye movement desensitization
reprocessing therapy. I know, it's a mouthful. Yeah. And it's basically just like bilateral stimulation. So therapists can do it by either you can hold little nodes that buzz right, left. You can tap even. There's a really good book, Dr. Laurel Parnell, called what does she call it? It's like the tapping effect or something like that. But it's stimulating the different hemispheres of the brain. And while you're talking about it, it kind of literally undoes the loop, the wiring. So the first time you tell the story, I was like sobbing. I was really triggered. It was hard for me to get it out. The second time it was still really triggering, but each time I told the story, it lessened the...
Desensitized.
Yeah, and kind of helped to reset my neural pathways and the parasympathetic response in my body. So those two modalities were really helpful right out of the gate. But, just having my master's in psychology and having this background and still not really recognize... It sounds ridiculous now. I wasn't recognizing that what I was going through was PTSD at all.
Yeah.
Which is like,
Yeah, but
Okay.
I mean, that's the whole thing. Like we can, especially you get training to help others, but we have blind spots, which is why, I think it's the way God designed us or energy designed us, because we're meant to be in community, right? We're not meant to heal in isolation.
No.
So we have blind spots so we can seek out. I mean, we ultimately are all our own self-healers, but sometimes we need people to reflect back to us because we have blind spots.
Absolutely. Or we're just so trained to like, I got it, and it's like, no. So now I've even like some of my friends who I love so much and are so smart, but it's like anxiety, stress, trouble sleeping, digestion issues. These can all be signs and symptoms that there's something else to look at.
Right.
And it's okay to look at it. Like, let's look at it, because that's another thing. If we don't look at it, it's going to still come out. I just rather look at it and maybe help it out in the way that I would like for it to come out.
Yes, totally. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about the actual event that was important. I mean, you still live in Montecito, correct?
Well, I actually moved downtown.
Okay.
So I live maybe like 7 minutes from Montecito.
Because I imagine it would be hard to go back up on the hill. I don't know.
It still is. It's kind of amazing how quickly, I mean, that was only 5 years ago, they've rebuilt in that area. There have been mudslides in Montecito over the years, like every 20 years, and they've said there'll be another one in 20 years. But so that, to me, like, that's something I've had to let go of. Like, people choose their own path. Like, you're buying a house in the red zone. I don't know.
Yeah.
I live downtown.
Yeah.
I live near the Mission, the Mission in Santa Barbara, which actually, the Mission was put there because it is a very safe place. I have heard that the Chumash Indians used Montecito as a burial ground back in the day. So I'm not going to say anything about what that might mean, but I'm just going to live downtown. Montecito's gorgeous, and it is still hard for me to go. So that probably means that there's more work for me to do, Kelly.
There's always work to be done.
There is, right?
Layer upon layer.
Yeah.
I talked a little bit about, I love this concept of initiation. And I think it's really important to, address, like, I think of this Edith Eger, who has there's so many different quotes. There's a quote in Buddhism about, suffering is going to be a part of life, but
I remember it.
Okay. So I think it was Edith Eger. What did she say? It's something about victimization and suffering, like.
Yes, Dr. Edith Eger, who I love so much. She is a Holocaust survivor. She survived Auschwitz, and she has had a thriving practice in La Jolla. She's a therapist for decades now. And she says, she's written 2 books too, The Gift and the Choice, that I highly recommend. But she says that victimization is a part of life where, you live long enough, you're going to experience suffering and being a victim. Victimhood is our choice. And when I interviewed her for the book, she's so cute. She was like, you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, honey. You don't set up camp there. You keep going.
Yes.
So, and she's someone too that talks about how there's no like comparison of like, well, your trauma is worse than mine or whatever. It's like everyone's trauma is the worst because it happened to them.
It's all relative. Yeah. And it's all the same, scale per person in different situations and circumstances, and it's all it's all traumatic to them.
Yes,
right.
I still though think I'm like, well, if she can do it, then I can do it.
I know, right? Yeah. Exactly. Hers, Auschwitz, could possibly be
it could possibly be
the highest on the hierarchy, even though you say in your book there's no hierarchy of suffering. So it's hard sometimes. I think you even acknowledged it, that you, for so many years, and sexual assault and abuse is so common in a lot of children's, sadly, history. And you talked about how you just held on to that story for so long, and it wasn't like you weren't exactly remaining in victimhood, but it's just so important the way we use our language, the power of language, and how we're telling the story. And it's such a subtle shift to be setting up camp in the valley, or moving through it and not choosing to stay in victimhood. Because you say in your book, it's an initiation. Everything that happens to us shapes us and makes us more resilient and shapes us in who we are today, And so talk a little bit about your experience with that and some of the ahas or realizations around victimhood.
Well, and I too want to address like the concept of initiation, because that's something that kept coming up for me. So while there was like certainly a lot of the PTSD experiences, panic attacks, I know you referenced a panic attack on your last episode. So I was having those. And again, like with my background, I was like, did I eat something? Like, is it just like a heat stroke? Like, no, it's, I had a panic attack because someone was talking about how the mudslides will happen again. Or, I was at a luncheon for children that are abused and thinking about, oh my God, and it happened again. So I was definitely experiencing those symptoms. And at the same time, I was having growth opportunities and amazing synergies happen, kind of like, what happens when we're really meditating a lot, when we're in that space and things just kind of line up. That was happening. I think there's almost something that happens, and I talk about it in the book, like when you're so traumatized, like the frontal part of your brain almost, it felt like mine was just shut down. And so there was just like more of a direct connection to the divine. So I would think something or desire something and like it would happen, and it just kept flowing. So I started to think about that. And the more I was telling this story, I was realizing that there were so many silver linings and amazing things that had happened, not in spite of the mudslide, but like because of having gone through that and then the healing that happened. So there was 2 different people, this Jungian psychiatrist. He was like, oh, you've been initiated. And I was like, okay. And then a shaman in the Arizona desert, like, you've been initiated. So I kept hearing that. And I was like, initiated to what? You know? And at least in the shamanic tradition, when you face your own death and survive, they say that's an initiation. Like, you've kind of looked your own death and you realize that we're all, this dimension is very temporary and there's so much more. So that is an initiation into like a fuller experience, I guess.
Yeah, and you experienced connection, almost like a near-death experience, even though you're alive and well and traumatized on your bathroom counter, but you felt that presence.
Yes.
And that's a connection, like a direct divine connection, or you're feeling a deeper level of reality. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think you also talk in the book is like the mother and the sister who were grieving Dan Eldon, the photojournalist, like they, being murdered in Somalia, like they felt the extreme end of the spectrum of grief. I mean, any loss is extreme. But murder is just like such an extreme way to handle grief and loss. But they said on the other side of that, the pendulum swings. Now that I've felt that depth of darkness and sadness, the pendulum swings that high on the other side to feel so much greater joy. And so it almost like that initiation just gets to a deeper level of a richness of life in a way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, because a lot of us go around, like if we went around realizing how fragile we are and how precious it all is, I think we'd probably never leave the room,
Yeah.
but our houses. But having that awareness of this is temporary, this experience anyway. So how can we make the most of it, and how can we spend time more with people that we love and on doing things that bring us joy, and having experiences, like not putting things off because we don't know how long we have in this physical body.
And you distinguish between, a trauma from a natural disaster where there's no shame, there's no I did this, it's my fault, in contrast with like a sexual abuse situation. So talk to me a little bit about how because I know people two people from the same family, both were sexually abused. One went on to thrive, and one is stuck in that story and drug abuse and everything else. So what, for anybody out there that feels stuck and just like doesn't know how to forgive the perpetrator or see it as like find any silver lining in it, is just plagued and depressed and bogged down by this horrific experience and memory and loop, what is your, what advice do you give them that helped you?
Well, first of all, I want to clarify, I talk about how trauma can be a gift. And I do not mean that being assaulted or losing someone or going through something terrible, that's not what I'm talking about. That's not the gift. The gift comes in what we're talking about before, like this realization that life is fragile and beautiful and to be cherished, so to move through it with healing. In terms of assault, I think that, and it's so important, and I have to keep telling myself, even 30 years later, you did nothing wrong. It is not your fault. And that, to say to, and for someone who's been in that experience to really take that in, you didn't do anything wrong. In our culture, there is this whole was she wearing this? Was she drunk? It doesn't matter. You did nothing wrong. It's not your fault. So that for me is something that still comes up, and reminding myself and talking to my children about other people and having good boundaries and saying no, and you can always tell me anything. So I think having a really good relationship with your children, encouraging that communication and forgiveness. So that is a Buddha quote, I think, something along the lines of resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. So that to me is like forgiveness. And this I struggled with for such a long time. It was it was so hard for me to forgive, especially my first perpetrator. He was a 70-year-old man and I was a 7-year-old little girl. And the way that I worked through it is what must have happened to him so I kind of picture him as a 7-year-old child, or, and something, clearly there was some kind of breakdown or abuse, and then it carried over to me. So that for me, to be able to forgive the people that violated me by imagining them as children, that helped a lot.
Oof, yeah. And there was something you said, or maybe I'm projecting my beliefs, but in Dispenza's meditation, retreat that I just went on, and different a plant medicine journey, when we've connected and gotten downloads, whether it's from deep meditation and you're just all of a sudden channeling, information from your higher self, or you're, doing some sort of ceremony and journey, and you're just getting information, there's everything. It's hard to articulate, but everything is divinely orchestrated in a way. And maybe one way, and it doesn't make sense, why would God cause this much suffering? But this is a deeper conversation for maybe a spiritual master teacher. But I liked what you described in, maybe it was your ketamine journey, which again is a psychedelic. So you had this vision of angels. So tell us about that vision, because I think it paints a good picture, and is an extension of this little boy that turned into this monster, and going back to where does the cycle of blame begin? You know what I mean? To blame anybody. So it's really, I think the more important thing is to take your power back and say, I am still here. I survived. I am strong. It led me on this path for this life that I love in the healing world and empowering other women, and then seeing the perpetrator as a young boy, as innocent at some point in his life. But talk to us about this experience on the ketamine journey, because I think it just helps me see, and I've had similar experiences in different, healing ceremonies, where you just see that everything led to this very moment and everything was perfect just as it was.
Yes. Which I think it is hard because we're like, ooh, that's hard, ooh, bad. But, if we stop labeling like bad and good and everything just is. And also something that I like to say and I think is helpful is not why did this happen to me? Because again, that's victim, but how did this happen for me? What's the opportunity here? And something that we might perceive as difficult. Well, if that hadn't have happened, then I'm in traffic. Well, maybe if you had not been in traffic, you would have been the car hit. Or we just don't know.
Yeah.
So ketamine. I, first of all, want to say that I was like the biggest goody two-shoes growing up. Well, sort of. Actually, you ask any of my friends and they'd be like, But in terms of like drugs, I grew up in the 80s with like the Just Say No. And literally never did a drug, was like bad at smoking pot. I do like my drinks, but anyway, so I met Dr. Jeff Becker. He's up in Santa Barbara. I met his wife first, and she kind of knew about my story and what was going on. And she was like, I really think you would love ketamine therapy. So ketamine, Dr. Becker, Jeff, who's now a good friend, he explains it is the gentlest but the most powerful psychedelic. It's also legal. It's the only legal psychedelic in our country. They actually use it at much higher doses as an anesthetic for children in, anesthetic for children in hospitals. But it can be really effectively used for PTSD, trauma. They're using it a lot with vets, for people that have suicidal ideation. And so I went all in. And I also want to say too, I feel like there's all these ketamine bars are popping up. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like doing it with a psychiatrist. You do your pre-work, you do the sessions, and then you have the integration.
Yeah, integration is so essential.
It's totally essential.
Otherwise it's just a party drug.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So with reverence, we did it. And the first session, at the last, I was shown, actually the first thing I was shown, I was thinking I was going in for just the mudslide. And the first image that got shown to me was the 7-year-old Mary with this man. But what ketamine does, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's almost like you're a viewer. So I felt it was like there was depersonalized, actually, maybe. So I could see it and the scene, and then out of the blackness, this like huge gorilla's face comes, and I was like, am I scared of the gorilla? And I was like, oh no, I'm not scared of the gorilla. It's a good gorilla. And the gorilla came into the scene and like scooped little 7-year-old Mary away from the man and out of that scene. And then I was like on the back of a Pegasus and safe and flying. And, I think again, it was like, there's so much joy and freedom when we free ourselves of that victim story. And then the last scene, I remember I felt like I was conscious enough to be like, okay, what else do you want to show me? Mm-hmm. I don't know who the you is, but the you, angels, God,
my higher self.
Yeah. And it was the mudslide, and I was kind of out over the Pacific Ocean looking at Montecito and the mountains. And I felt warm and safe, and I saw, it was almost like angels pouring the mud down the mountains, and like these beams of light like pulling up the 23 souls that lost their physical lives that day, like pulling them up. And it almost looked like a Renaissance oil painting. Mm-hmm. It was so beautiful. And in that moment, it was like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it now. It was like, it's all okay. It just was. Like, that was the time. It wasn't my time. And it's all okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that gave me, there was so much peace for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's actual neural pathway and like actual physical brain matter regeneration, I think, with ketamine. I know it is with ibogaine too, but if like you want to speak to that.
Yeah, there's rewiring of the neural pathways. And as Dr. Becker explained, it's like, if you think about the different parts of the brain, think about it like, a high school population. It's
social
like,
groups.
Social groups. Like, maybe the band doesn't talk to the jocks, don't talk to the cheerleaders. Like, the different groups don't normally talk. With ketamine, like, whoop, everyone's talking to everybody. Coherence. And then afterwards, that coherence remains. And it's like any kind of neural pathway that gets reinforced. These neural pathways, these new ones, keep getting reinforced. Mm-hmm. And then you keep noticing, what we're talking about too, like these synergies and things happening and synchronicities. Mm-hmm. So for me, ketamine was really life-changing.
Yeah, that's good. I spoke about this before in an episode with Dr. Mike Dow, who does ketamine therapy or ketamine-assisted therapy, I guess it's called. And I had a judgment because I was like, I know people that have for years, abused ketamine in a party environment. It's just another escape and it's another euphoric moment or whatever. But it's so wonderful that people can now, with integration and proper administration and hand-holding by a trained professional, that you can use it for really just reconnection within yourself, within your brain, and then a greater connection to every union with the oneness, with humanity.
Yes.
That's what I know people experience. So
yeah, which I feel like that is it seems to be like a theme that we're both really interested in. Like, it's just another way to, like, meditation, like ketamine, like, to get to access these other states of being that are available to us all the time. Yeah. But we're just, we have to, drive the car and in the 3-dimensional reality and do certain things in this reality. But I love that reminder of, like, these dimensions are available. They're there all the time.
Yeah. And yeah, this 3D world is such an illusion of separation.
Yes.
And then trauma makes pours gasoline on that separation, and it isolates you and it disconnects you, and it deepens your mistrust of humanity. And these experiences, meditation or working with a shaman, all of these healing, even cranial sacral, like, you just melt out of the separation and into connection. And I think that's what healing is ultimately about.
Yeah. And that's why I really write this book, like the feeling of aloneness, and there's no need to feel that alone. Like, I want to create a community for people and just know, like, I pictured someone in the middle of this country who doesn't have access, or maybe he's never heard of some of these modalities that we're talking about, to know that, like, she's not alone. I just kept picturing this woman, and
yeah, it's such a gift. This is a great resource. There was one thing that I hadn't heard about in the book that I was like, ooh, this is exciting, and it's actually a pharmaceutical, which to come out of my mouth, I was like, whoa. But just for people with phobias, I know that a lot of them resort to like a Xanax or a, something, an anti-anxiety before a flight or something like this. And you mentioned Dr. Jeff told you about this other thing that I can't remember the name. It starts with a P.
Propranolol.
It's
really hard to say and spell.
It's propranolol, and it's a beta blocker, but it actually has phobia dissipating ability.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that a little bit? Because I know that people with, let's say, fear of flying or something, or fear of heights, like, they've tried hypnotherapy, they've tried other things, and so they just have to resort to, like, basically just taking a Xanax and being unconscious,
out of it.
While you're in the experience. But this sounds like it's a better bridge.
Yeah. So Dr. Becker was like, wait, no one's prescribed propranolol for you? I'm like, no, what is propranolol?
Yeah.
And it is a beta blocker. And he's like, honestly, it's safe for kids. You could take them, frequently. There's no dependence issues. And all it does is it really just, like, settles you down. Like, a lot of actually, like, rock stars and actors, people will take them before public speaking or before going on stage. It just settles you down. And Dr. Becker explained, it's like, most people that go, take a Xanax before a flight, then they get through the flight. But they know that they need Xanax to get through the flight. If you take a propranolol, you are completely coherent. So you learn that I can get through the flight. Because he was talking about how fear proliferates. So it's like we might have 1 panic attack in June. Then you have 3 in July. Then you have 10 in August, and so on and so forth. But he was talking about how even kids with test-taking panic attacks and stuff like that, if they take propranolol early, you catch it early, then it begins to prune that fear proliferation.
Right. Okay.
So it's quite amazing.
Something to look into. I haven't
Yeah.
researched it. I was just like, oh, this could be something, while you're searching to get to the root cause of your phobia, maybe through hypnotherapy or something else. Like, this sounds like something to explore.
Absolutely. I feel like it's been a really helpful tool. And actually, he would have me take a propranolol the first time because I was terrified of drugs.
Yeah.
Take a propranolol like an hour before we did the ketamine, just to calm down.
Yeah, and even to drive around Montecito, like close to the, site of the trauma, to like start to desensitize, and you just go in there, and it does something with adrenaline. I think it like shuts down the adrenaline response or something, so that you could. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. We would need to.
I'm speaking out of turn
Becker
here. Yeah, we'll interview him. Anyways, ask your doctor about it. If that sounds interesting to you.
Yeah, very helpful.
Yeah. So what else? What is NLP? I've never done NLP. I've heard about it. How is it different than EMDR?
They are similar. So NLP is Neuro-Linguistic programming, and they both kind of use eye movement, the back and forth stimulation. I feel like NLP is like a form of hypnosis almost. I need to introduce you to Kim Vincent. She's amazing.
Okay.
She does it. She's in Ojai.
Okay.
But it is, like, again, I think so many of these therapies and modalities, like a lot of them have similar tenets and roots. So again, it's another way to like reprocess and reconfigure a memory or an experience. And even going back to like, you asked me about like the language and the reframing, that too, I think is so important. Like, instead of like, I almost died in the mudslide, I survived the mudslide. I used my voice. I woke everybody up. I'm still here, just like the subtle shifts in our language. So that too, Dr. Eager talks about that as well, like rewriting your story. Like, what is your trauma story, and how can you rewrite it in a way that's more empowering?
Yeah, I know. That's a really big one with disease too, because I know Rob Morgan is a big fan of this, like not giving yourself a label, like rip that label off. Like don't affirm to all your new cells that are birthing every day that I have cancer. It's like, I don't know what the right reframe is in the language to use, but that label almost like keeps you in victimhood almost vibrationally, right?
Yeah, maybe like my body is healing, and what you said before, my body knows exactly what to do. And, it's in our, what's the word? It's like innate. It's like an innate healing capability.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity. It's like the Chinese symbol for danger is made up of 2 characters, crisis and opportunity.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love that too. So yeah, and I know a lot of people who do make it through, a healing journey where they were told they weren't going to live, and then they change everything about their life, and the person that there was a death, like the old self, with the patterns and the habits and the history or whatever it is that, that was part of their story. That person died and they were rebirthed into the new them where cancer doesn't exist, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But so there can be a death. It's just the death of an idea or a persona or the old self, right?
I think so, because how do you go through all this and like almost it's like a birth canal is what it feels like to me sometimes. And that's what I've told people that are like, I don't know what to do, and I'm in the middle of this. And it's like, I understand, because I'm so impatient, and you just want to get through it and get to the light. But it's, it's this unfolding. But my whole life changed. I mean, I wound up getting divorced. but I'm in love with this amazing man that I actually met because I interviewed him for the book. So, it's just, and this whole book happened, and my life has opened up in so many different ways.
And many people on the other side of like healing cancer feel it was their greatest gift and they wouldn't change it. But in the moment, it's the scariest, darkest, highest pressure, terrifying thing. You're in the birth canal, you're feeling suffocated, you're in the cocoon, you're feeling all that like pressure and darkness and terror. And but on the other side, you're a butterfly. You're a brand new reborn.
Yeah. And if it never got dark, we wouldn't know when it was light.
We wouldn't appreciate it, yeah.
I like to remind myself of that.
Yeah.
Even in those like days where you're like, it's like, well, if I didn't have these days, then I wouldn't know when I was having days.
Yeah, totally. We need the contrast. We need the darkness to see the stars.
Yeah.
How, like, what you've tried everything. We both are very blessed to have the resources to try many things. A lot of people out there don't have the resources. Give some tips or kind of, ideas on what people can do to make things more accessible and affordable, or what do you say to people in searching, because there are a lot of snake oil salesmen, bad shamans, hacks, whatever it is. I don't know, but there's not everybody could be the best healer you've ever gone to. And definitely there's a sliding scale of talent and gifts and integrity. Yeah. So how do you navigate that as someone who doesn't feel like they can afford a $400 or $200 session? And so there's like fear and tension going in. Like, what if this guy isn't as good as he says he is? You know what I mean?
Well, even before like getting to going to someone, there's so many things we can do for free. Like breath work is, we're breathing right now. We're all doing it. And just by doing some breathing exercises, like box breathing is a really simple way to kind of reset the parasympathetic nervous system. That's like breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, holding for 4 at the bottom. That's box breathing. There's a ton of different breathwork techniques. Meditation is free. There's lots of different meditations. I have one on my site. I think Joe has some free ones definitely out there.
YouTube has a lot. And essential oils, those are not costs. Some of them can be costly, but if you go to like a Whole Foods or any kind of health food store, there are flower essences and essential oils, which are different. And they're both really powerful. Like aspen and pine are 2 really good flower essences for trauma. In terms of essential oils, sandalwood can be really grounding. Magnolia is an amazing essential oil for healing trauma. And again, going back to that, like nature as a healer, like really it's all, if we're all one. Yeah. And if, Chinese medicine, even I feel like in the qi, which is life force energy, we're the trees are us, we're the ocean, and like getting into harmony with nature. So those are just some really easy ways and free ways to begin healing on your own. Journaling too, free. In terms of navigating practitioners and healers, I think that really, like word of mouth, so it's the best qualifier.
It's the best qualifier, and sometimes someone might have a connection. This kind of work is very personal. So if you don't feel resonant with that person, then they're not the right person. It doesn't mean it's not the right therapy. It just try another. You
really need to trust your intuition, I think.
You do.
And like when finding a therapist, you've got to interview multiple,
Yes.
Or if you meet someone based on someone's recommendation, it might have been right for them at that right time, and it's not resonant. So I really do feel like if you can just tune into your body's own guidance system, and that's a tricky thing to cultivate, but it's there.
Yeah, and I would say even before that, because a lot of times, like when we're like post-trauma, or if we want to call it, say anxious or stressed or whatever people want to call it, to get more realigned before you begin to like reach out to people. So, maybe maybe you start with like a short breathing and meditation practice every day. And I know people are like, I don't have time or whatever. But, we make time to go to the gym or meet that friend. Like, I'm not, it's like 10 minutes, you know? And you can do 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night before going out. And most healers and therapists will offer like a 15-minute, half an hour chemistry chat, I think. And if they don't, then that's probably not the right.
And a lot of them work on a sliding scale, as you mentioned in your book. So they work with people based on affordability. Yeah. I think.
Yeah.
And that's why we like WellSet too. Not to plug WellSet, but I think it's a really great resource because you can have on-demand and live classes for, very nominal monthly fee. And it's like the Peloton of mental health. You can you can do sound healing. You can do, tapping. There's all these modalities that you can access for as many as you want for this, membership.
Great.
Or whatever. So there are resources out there. And like you said, breath work, we love. Breath work is some of my favorite transformational. I mean, it's so powerful. We had an experience you talked about in the book with Gwen Dittmar. But it really moves so much energy and stuck trauma in your body.
Much.
Yeah.
That's almost, I have said, like almost as powerful as the ketamine.
I agree.
And
I say it's like almost as powerful. And with no exogenous substance, right? It's our own instrument. That's why, we're all our own self-healer, but we're here to commune with each other and walk each other home. So really lean into your community support groups for people that have gone through similar traumas or diagnoses, loss, whatever it is, and lean into them and what they've done. And then really, get the guidance from your internal guidance system.
Yeah.
But this book is anyone with any kind of trauma. It's a real beautiful resource of things that are available,
Thank you, Kelly.
So thank you for sharing your story and healing and being vulnerable and opening up about everything you've tried and what it brought up for you.
Thank you, Kelly.
What do you guys have next? I know you and your sister Lucy, wish Lucy was here.
I know, me too.
You guys started the Firestone Sisters and you do these retreats. So talk to us about that and what you have coming up in the fall.
Yeah, we have done, now it's sort of more like an annual retreat down to Mustique in the Caribbean, which is amazing.
I still have yet to go.
I know, you need to come. So that island amazing. In and of itself is basically a retreat. But we do some again, it's like tuning out to tune in so that we can hear ourselves and our intuition. It's a very loud world we live in. And then we also have 2 different essential oil-based perfumes that we designed to make you feel good, not just smell good. And then on my own in the fall, in October, I'm doing a 2-day summit, bringing the book to life in Montecito and bringing different experts that I feature in the book to speak and teach, including Joe Dispenza.
Joe D. Woohoo! Amazing. So where can they find out and sign up for that summit or at your retreats?
On my Instagram, which is, what is my Instagram? Mary Firestone 13. And then maryfirestone.co.com, because someone has that. And then Lucy and I have Firestone Sisters together.
Awesome. We'll share all the links in the show notes and everything.
Thank you.
But thank you. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners out there?
I feel like I'm going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. Like if I can do it, if you can do it, if Dr. Edie can do it, then you can do it too. Yeah. You're not alone. I like that one too. Not alone.
Yeah, and find the opportunity.
Yeah, why did this happen for me?
And why did you survive it? You have a lot of life to give, and you have a lot of gifts to express. So,
amen.
Get this book and climb your way out of that damn dark valley.
That's right, because it's really light over here.
It is, and it's uncomfortable in the
birth canal.
In the birth canal, but there's a beautiful new you waiting on the other side. So, keep going. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you for listening to the Heal podcast. Be sure to tune in for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. Oh, and make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. And if you feel inspired, we would love you to rate and review us so that we have the opportunity to reach more people. And of course, you can follow us on Instagram for some behind-the-scenes fun and more inspiration at @HealDocumentary and @KellyGorris. Thank you so much, and be well.